was inevitable. The nationalist was urging his listeners to question the prevailing narrative, to think the unthinkable, to bend the arc of history. Through my windshield, I could see a sliver of the Pacific. Picturesque, but not all that Pacific. On the Hermosa Beach boardwalk, there were longboards and mirrored sunglasses and poke bowls and matcha smoothies. A small film crew from women.com was shooting a series of woman-on-the-street interviews about sex positivity. On the beach, a crowd had gathered around a drum circle. "Can you feel the Earth's rhythm?" one of the drummers asked, passing around a bucket for donations. I spotted about a dozen beefy white men dressed in t-shirts and shorts, milling around near an outdoor bar. In the middle of the scrum was the nationalist motivational speaker. Most people on the boardwalk didn't recognize him, but to his followers, both in person and on the internet, he was something of a hero, or maybe an anti-hero, an expert at injecting fringe ideas into mainstream discourse. A few months earlier, he had decided, based on no real evidence, that Hillary Clinton was suffering from a grave neurological condition and that the traditional media was covering it up. He turned this conjecture into a meme, which gathered momentum on Twitter, then leaped to the Drudge Report, then to Fox News, and then into Donald Trump's mouth. The nationalist had told me, "All the people at each step may or may not know my name, but I'm influencing world history whether they know where their ideas are coming from or not." He was hosting what he called a free speech happy hour, a meetup for local masculinists, neo-monarchists, nihilist Twitter trolls, and other self-taught culture warriors. About 60 people showed up over the course of the afternoon. Some refused to call themselves alt-right, which had become, in their words, a toxic brand. Others were happy to own the label. Most were white, most were nationalists, and some were white nationalists. Not the old skinhead type, but the more polished, just asking the question variety. For years, they'd been able to promote their agenda through social networks like Twitter and Facebook, with almost no restrictions. Now the networks were starting to crack down, banning a few of the most egregious trolls and bigots. "It's straight-up thought policing," one person at the meetup said. "It's 1984. A pudgy guy with oversized sunglasses sat at a table by himself. On his t-shirt was a drawing of Harambe, a gorilla who'd recently been shot to death at the Cincinnati Zoo. The incident had resulted in real internet outrage, followed by satirical internet outrage, followed by absurdist meta-commentaries on the phenomenon of internet outrage. All afternoon, I saw people pointing at the guy's t-shirt and laughing as they passed by. "Fuck yeah, Harambe," they'd say, or "Dicks out for Harambe." The guy wearing the t-shirt would nod knowingly, as if in solidarity. That was the extent of the interaction. I sat down next to the guy and asked him to explain the joke. "It's a funny thing people say or post or whatever," he said. It's just a thing on the internet." Harambe, of course, was a real animal before he became a meme. Still, I knew what it was like to experience much of life through the mediating effects of a screen. It wasn't hard for me to imagine how anything, a dead gorilla, a gas chamber, a presidential election, a moral principle, could start to seem like just another thing on the internet. For as long as the United States has been a country, there have been Americans handing out pamphlets declaring taxation unconstitutional, or standing on soapboxes railing against papist sabotage, or calling C-SPAN to demand that every member of Congress be investigated for treason. C-SPAN's screeners, if they were doing their jobs, did not put those callers on air. The First Amendment protected this minority's right to speak, and for a long time it seemed as if the majority were not inclined to listen. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy said, "There have always been those on the fringes of our society who have sought to escape their own responsibility by finding a simple solution, an appealing slogan, or a convenient scapegoat. But in time, the basic good sense and stability of the great American consensus has always prevailed." In 2004 and 2005, a few young men wrote the computer code that would grow into a vast industry called social media. Social, because people could receive information horizontally from their friends rather than waiting for gatekeepers to impart it from on high. And media, because information was information, whether it came from a stilted broadcaster, a kid procrastinating during study hall, or a nationalist on a boardwalk. The social media entrepreneurs called themselves disruptors, but they rarely described in much detail.